And sometimes that's one of the most dangerous places that you can be. Like oftentimes joking here, I'll say, all right, whatever, class motto, good enough. And good enough is one of the most dangerous places that you can be in your life, because if it's just good enough, then you're not motivated to do better. So often people complain about, the real world, you gotta pay bills. Dude, you don't need money. Money only matters to people who pay bills. In other words, if you want to work less, what do? You get fewer bills. Life becomes expensive because of all the stuff we have. You have a much nicer apartment than you need, well then you're going to be paying more for that. And we'll convince ourselves, but I need a new car. Because with a new car, that's how I can get to work. You can buy a used car, you can take the bus. I don't want to take the bus. It's the I don't want to's that locks us into life. We buy a car that we can't afford yet because we're convinced, or we've been trained anyway, to believe that everybody has to have a new car. No, you don't, man. Your first car should be a pile of crap. That's how you learn how to fix things. That's how you learn how to take the bus. That's how you learn how to change a tire, man. And then you learn how to deal with that adversity. And yeah, it's irritating, but you know what? It's your pile of crap, and it's your life now because you're not making payments on it necessarily. And so now you can afford to go do other things. You're not locked in. You can afford to explore the world and the world of possibilities. That's the important thing, to explore a world of possibilities. Looking at a dingy hotel room, are things as bad as they could be? No, he has a hotel room. It's a crappy one, but it's a hotel room. And sometimes that's one of the most dangerous places that you can be. Like oftentimes joking here, I'll say, all right, whatever, class motto, good enough. And good enough is one of the most dangerous places that you can be in your life, because if it's just good enough, then you're not motivated to do better. In other words, if you find yourself on the streets and homeless, you have a real motivation because you realize that the clock is ticking. Most people, if they're not off the streets within 60 days, I think it is, there's a really high chance that you're going to spend the rest of your life there. So you need to get off that street like now, like today. And if you recognize that, that motivates you to do it. If you're in a job that you really don't like, but it pays you just enough to pay the bills, but it also leaves you just tired enough so that when you get home, you don't go looking for another job. That's a really dangerous place to be. It's kind of like if you get a job now. I got a student, one of my first couple of years, he was a senior, he got a job working at Pizza Hut, and he bought a new car because he was making enough money because he was living at home where he could pay for the car. But then what that meant was he couldn't go to certain senior activities. He couldn't go to prom, he couldn't go to grad night. And it wasn't just because he didn't have enough money, it was because those happened to be on the busy nights of the week, Friday and Saturday. And that's when he was expected to work because he worked at Pizza Hut. So when he was asking for those days off, the manager knew, no, you can't take those days off. You need those days. I need those employees here, and you can't afford to quit because you need this job because you need to pay for your car. It gave him just enough so that he was getting by, so it didn't motivate him enough to go out and find something better, but it locked him into a life that he really didn't want to be living. It's just like if students who ask me if I think that they should go to college. I'll tell you, very few of you should go to college. I do not recommend college for the overwhelming majority of people. If you go to college, there's a good chance that you're going to pay a whole bunch of money, you're going to get into a bunch of debt for a degree that's not really super practical, not super useful. In other words, we get a degree not because we're interested in something, but because we think it's going to give us more money. I can't tell you how many students I have who I ask them what they're studying, and they'll say something like, I don't know, like psychology. I'll be like, oh, are you fascinated by psychology? No, it's interesting. Well, then why are you studying it? Oh, because it'll help me get a job. In other words, you're not pursuing the thing because you love it, you're pursuing it because you think it's going to get you a few more slices of cheese later in life. But then what that means is you're going to have to take out a bunch of student loans, and you're going to be missing other opportunities in your life. And at the end of all of it, you're going to have a bunch of loans, so you're going to have to work Saturdays when your boss tells you to. You're going to have to work Sundays when your boss tells you to, because he knows that you need that job. You can't just up and quit. You can't just go find something else. It locks you in. And then pile on any other responsibilities that you want on top of that. If if you have children when you're too young, or if you have a family when you're too young, or if you buy, you have an apartment you really can't afford, it's too expensive of an apartment or whatever, and then you're guaranteed to be there for the rest of your life because you just don't have the freedom to go off and do better. And think about how many people we know who have jobs they don't like and they believe they could do better, but when they get home from work they're just too tired. Oh man, 40 hours a week and weekends it's just focused on just trying to unwind. You don't have enough energy to do evening classes or to do weekend classes to improve your station, but instead you're locked into it. Now a lot of times that's just mental. You think you're locked into stuff that you're not locked into. You're really not. But we convince ourselves that we are. Like we convince ourselves, think about when you hear about what the real world is like. So often people complain about, the real world, you gotta pay bills. Dude, you don't need money. Money only matters to people who pay bills. In other words, if you want to work less, what do? Well, you get fewer bills. Life becomes expensive because of all the stuff we have. You have a much nicer apartment than you need, well then you're gonna be paying more for that. And we'll convince ourselves, but I need a new car. Because with a new car, that's how I can get to work. You can buy a used car, you can take the bus. I don't want to take the bus. It's the I don't want to's that locks us into life. We buy a car that we can't afford yet because we're convinced, or we've been trained anyway, to believe that everybody has to have a new car. No, you don't, man. Your first car should be a pile of crap. That's how you learn how to fix things. That's how you learn how to take the bus. That's how you learn how to change a tire, man. And then you learn how to deal with that adversity. And yeah, it's irritating, but you know what? It's your pile of crap, and it's your life now because you're not making payments on it necessarily. And so now you can afford to go do other things. You're not locked in. You can afford to explore the world and the world of possibilities. That's the important thing, to explore a world of possibilities. And so we get an apartment that's too expensive for us. We get a car that's too expensive for us. And of course, you have to have insurance now. Of course, the more expensive the car, the more expensive the insurance, the more expensive the registration. And then we look at the things that we eat. Well, you have to spend this much for food. No, man. Money only matters to people who pay bills. The more bills you have, the more money you're going to have to make. And then the more money you're going to have to make, the more you're locked into a job that you might not want to do. And all of a sudden, man, you can ask any person you know who's over 21 even. Ask them where the last year has gone. Where's the last 2 years gone? How often do you hear people say, oh my God, the years have flown by. Wow, you're already 16? Man, it seems like just yesterday you were this big. I mean, how often do you hear that from relatives and friends and family? And that's because those last 10 years went by like that to them. And if you were to ask them, 10 years ago, did you think you'd be where you are today? For better or worse? The answer is almost always no. I didn't think I was ever going to be here. The real danger is that guy who sits in that hotel room and says, I will always be here. That's that crummy life. And we have this weird thing in our lives, man, where we balance this out. I like this quote because, understand what I mean when I say this, almost nobody gets it right. Because it looks like it should be more complicated than it is. It's relatively straightforward. I had a poetry professor once named Ron Kirchie. Ron Kirchie is a pretty well-known poet. I think he's a really crappy poet. He's not very good. But I took a poetry class from him when I was in college because he's well-known. He should know some things, so you should go learn some things from him. And he gave me the best advice I ever got for reading poetry. And in fact, it's the best advice I've ever gotten for reading anything in life. And so even just for that, it was worthwhile taking that class. And the advice he gave me for reading poetry was, read the words in the order in which they're printed. Read the words in the order in which they're printed. In other words, if I give you a poem, don't immediately go into, wait, what does this represent? Wait, what's he trying to say? No, just read the words in the order in which they're printed. Good poetry will be effective at that level. When you understand that there's also symbolism, the deeper level, that's better. But when you recognize that just read the words in the order in which they're printed, we're always looking for the deeper meaning or the alternate meaning or the metaphor or something like that. And this one's like that. One day I'll be old, dead, forgotten. So she's sitting there thinking, right now, God, someday I'm going to be gone. I'm going to be dead, and none of this is going to matter. In other words, my life is so impermanent. Everything in life is just so transient, passes by so quickly. At the same time, I'm thinking about how life is just going to be gone, and we're so transient. There's another person sitting in a dingy hotel room thinking, man, I'm always going to be here. See, those are the two far ends of the pessimistic view of life. One pessimistic view of life is, oh my God, I'm going to be dead, and no one's going to ever remember me because life just passes so quickly, it's transient. And then the other view is nothing changes. Everything is always the same. My life is always going to be crummy. Now, which of those two things is going to be true? I guess whichever one you adopt. Whichever one you adopt. Are you going to be old? Yeah. And we say old like it's a terrible thing. This is like a very, I don't know, man, like very 20th century view of it. I mean, there's this idea, I guess probably since the past 50 years or so, that when an old person comes through, we just completely dismiss what they have to say because, oh, you're old, you don't understand. You realize how stupid that is? Just on its face, just think about that. What would an old person not understand? They've been navigating this world for 3, 4, 5 times longer than most of us. They have figured out some things. They've made some mistakes. They've had friends who have made mistakes. They've had some successes, hopefully, and they have friends who've made some successes. They've learned a few things about life, and they've got wisdom. And yet, we will completely dismiss that and say we have to go make our own mistakes. It's like, why? Isn't that how you gain wisdom? And if that's so, can't you get it from people who've already made those mistakes? What it really is that we don't like it that there are people who are wiser than us who will give us advice that contradicts what we're presently doing. We just don't want to be told something that we're doing is bad. But wouldn't you want to know? And I think that the answer, whether we say yes or no to that, the answer to that is usually no. We don't want to know because pride. We want to believe that somehow we're different. Somehow we're unique. In philosophy, it's called a solipsistic mind. The idea that I'm the center of the universe and everything is different for me. I can read studies that will predict human behavior and say, well, yeah, but not me. Like everybody else, but not me. Somehow I'm going to be different. And yet when you realize that, no, probably not. Maybe, by the way, maybe. But, old doesn't have to be a terrible thing, especially in 2025, dude. In fact, it's a badge of honor if you've survived that long. Having said that, growing up, most of my friends from my group are dead or in jail or in rehab. I think a lot of them, especially the dead ones, man, I wish they got to be old. In fact, if they could switch places with anybody, I think they'd probably do that. They'd really rather be old than not alive at all. And then she'll be dead, of course, forgotten, maybe. But that doesn't say much about what we are today. Because what really matters, that's the future. That's the future. That's an idea that you have. If you ever consider that, it's a really important idea to understand. What matters is right now. It's the only thing that's real. The only thing that's real is right now. I don't mean that in some abstract hippie sense. I mean that legitimately. Your past, those are all memories. And let's face it, the memories you have probably not accurate anyway. They're probably, like right now if I asked you to remember a time when you were 7 years old, you're going to remember it from a 17-year-old mindset, not from a 7-year-old mindset. You're going to fill in the blanks with your imagination. That's what our brains do. So even your memories are probably not super accurate. If I asked you what your life is going to be like in 10 years, you couldn't possibly know. It's just a guess, it's a hope, it's a desire. The past is a memory, the future is a hope. The only thing that's actually real is right now, this moment you're living right now. And so is it true that someday you'll be dead? Yeah, that's true. Someday you'll have a headache too, by the way. Does that mean you should live every day like you have a headache? Like today doesn't matter because you have a headache tomorrow? Someday you're going to be hungry. Does that mean you should just stuff your face right now with as much food as possible every day of your life until then, so that when that day comes, It's stupid. We know that intuitively. You shouldn't live today just because that's how you're going to end up in the future. In fact, the better you live today, the less likely you are to live to fill that out. But that's the irony of it too. You live the best possible way today. I'm not saying you make the most of it. You live the best possible way today. And then your today will someday become that past, which will be a great past. But then your future will also be a great now, a great today, because you're doing things properly. If you understand that, then you understand that. But this last one line there, I'll always be here. Nothing is forever. Nothing is permanent. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Nothing. Will you always be in that dingy hotel room? No. Don't worry. Tomorrow, you might be on the streets. Will you always be in that dingy hotel room? No. Hey, tomorrow, you might be in the penthouse. And by the way, when you're in the penthouse, don't make that same mistake. I will always be here. Because you might not be. You might not be. You might, but you might not be. Whether it's good or bad, keep in mind it's only temporary. You don't own anything of the future. You only own this moment right now. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Dope. So we've got, happy Monday.